How did creatures taller than a 3-story building come to dominate every continent on our planet? What secrets do these fossilized footprints, frozen in the rock for over 100 million years, reveal? Dear traveler, welcome. Today we're off to a world where the impossible becomes reality. A time when extraordinary creatures reign supreme. Brachiosaurs, necks perched high in the treetops, graze peacefully on leaves that no other animal can reach. In the undergrowth, Compsognathus hunt in packs. While in the air, pterodactyls fly over seas populated by gigantic reptiles. From swamps teeming with life to verdant plains grazed by immense herds. From tropical shores to primeval forests. Each ecosystem tells a unique story, and each environment is home to species with astounding adaptations. But before you set off on your next adventure, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing. Thank you, and have a great trip! Dinosaurs inhabited the Earth during the Mesozoic era. This period stretches from 250 million years ago to 66 million years ago, and is divided into 3 main periods: the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. As you can imagine, in almost 200 million years, dinosaurs have evolved considerably. As the Earth's climate and geology are constantly evolving, plants and animals alike must constantly adapt to survive. This is what the dinosaurs did over the millions of years they lived on our planet. Thanks to research and various studies on the subject, we now know which dinosaurs lived at what time, with which other species, and above all, how they adapted to their environment. Dinosaurs form a very diverse group of animals which can be bipedal or quadrupedal, carnivorous or herbivorous, horned, plated, crested, or even feathered. The variety is enormous and the possibilities infinite. Despite their apparent differences, they all have one thing in common: their origin. Over 300 million years ago, reptiles conquered a major place in the animal kingdom. It was the evolution of this particular group that would later lead to our famous dinosaurs. What differentiates the reptile ancestors from the dinosaurs are their legs. In reptiles, they are located on the side. This can be seen in the crocodile, for example. Dinosaurs, on the other hand, whether feathered, carapaced, bipedal, or quadrupedal, all evolved with their legs under their bellies. Dinosaurs come in all shapes and sizes. Several thousand species of dinosaur have been discovered to date, but scientists believe there were many more. It all began 250 million years ago, at the dawn of the Mesozoic, with the onset of the Triassic. It's at this precise moment in our history that we now meet. What if the Earth were to turn in the opposite direction for a few moments to take us back in time? Let's skip the last few centuries, go back to the golden age of the pyramids, the discovery of fire, the birth of mankind, go past the last extinctions, go through the various animal evolutions and radiations, and come back here now to just 252 million years ago. The past becomes our present. As if we'd entered a parallel world, Here we are on Earth at the very beginning of the Triassic. The Mesozoic has just opened its very first chapter on the world. Our planet has already been through a great deal and has seen many twists and turns. From the very first form of life to the complex animal that evolves here before our eyes, it has taken millions of years. The evolution of life on Earth continues its story with the arrival of extraordinary animals that still fascinate billions of human beings, the dinosaurs. From 252 to 201 million years ago, we find ourselves in the Triassic period, when the landscape was completely different. Our planet is totally different from anything we've ever known. A colossal ocean and a unique land, the face of the Earth is unrecognizable. We're here on Pangea, a land that includes all the continents. Pangea is surrounded by a superocean, the Panthalassa. C-shaped, it encloses a kind of sea, the Tethys. At the end of the Triassic period, tectonic plate movements fractured the oceanic crust from east to west, separating Pangea into two blocks, Laurasia to the north and Gondwana to the south. While life seems possible near seas and rivers, inland, desert and chaos still reign. The average global temperature is 19 degrees Celsius or 66 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius or 7 degrees Fahrenheit higher than today, and the ice caps have disappeared. In this essentially hot and dry environment, vegetation proved fairly resistant to the Permian-Triassic crisis. In the few million years since the Carboniferous, plants have evolved from a majority of large-leaved plants reproducing by free spores to predominantly sexual plants with ovules. The latter have smaller, hardier leaves, better adapted to arid conditions. The landscape was dominated by conifers, but also by ginkgos, cycads, and tree ferns. And yet, despite the seemingly flourishing plant cover, it's important to bear in mind the hot, dry climate. Inland, life is difficult, and the landscape and deserts are numerous. In the Triassic, seasons and climates are less diverse. Over most of Pangea, there are only two seasons, the rainy season and the dry season. During the dry season, it can take months and months before a drop of rain finally waters the land. If you move closer to the coast, on the other hand, you can see that the vegetation cover is more abundant, giving vegetarians plenty of time to thrive. Speaking of vegans, here's one that's very important to our story. It could even be, so to speak, the protagonist of our dinosaurian epic, since it's basically where it all began. Here is an Archosaurus. The Archosaurus is a clade that over millions of years gave rise to species that you might be familiar with today, such as crocodiles and birds, since the latter are descendants of the dinosaurs. So, as you'll have guessed, it's also the origin of dinosaurs and even pterosaurs, the flying reptiles. Archosaurs took off during the Triassic period, like this, Hadrosaurus, which lives in present-day Europe. Another archosaur, more like a crocodile in its long silhouette and morphology, lives in present-day North America. It's a Desmatosuchus. It preys on shore plants, which it loves. Other dinosaur forms have also left their mark on Earth's history, possibly giving rise to the dinosaur lineage, like this, Nyasasaurus. He doesn't know it yet, but our Archosaurus has finally met the man who will be part of his downfall, as the more agile and environmentally adapted dinosaur forms will eventually prevail to the detriment of the last Archosaurus species still alive during the last Triassic period. Coelophysis, for example, is one of those animals still considered to be among the very first dinosaurs to have walked the Earth. What makes them different from archosaurs or early dinosauriforms? Apart from their size, they seem pretty close to Saltopus. However, Celophysis has much more highly developed abilities than archosaurians and early dinosauromorphs, enabling it to adapt to its environment. First of all, as you can see, he's much more agile. This is because its skeleton is hollow and therefore lighter, but it remains robust. Its musculature, bone position, and tendons also give it greater ease, flexibility, and therefore speed. The respiratory system has also evolved. His pulmonary system is much more efficient. With better oxygenation, our Celophysis does much better than other distant cousins or ancestors in the same environment. This evolutionary step and the arrival of the dinosaurs will forever transform the face of the Earth and the order of living things. It was a springboard for thousands of new species. With the disappearance of competing species and post-crisis climate change, reptiles seized the opportunity to spread their wings to the air and seas, while archosaurs and then dinosaurs flourished on land. The first bipedal dinosaurs, like Celophysis, used their agility and speed to hunt, but also to avoid larger predators. They did rather well, and so reproduced, developed, and diversified. Their warm-bloodedness, which we haven't mentioned so far, is undoubtedly an additional asset that has contributed to their effervescence since the end of the Triassic, and even more so in the Jurassic. At least this is the hypothesis put forward by many scientists. Unlike reptiles, dinosaurs were indeed warm-blooded. This means they didn't need to bask in the sun for hours on end to gain energy, so they were much more active. By 230 million years ago, the two great lineages of ornithischians and saurischians had already formed, while at the end of the Triassic period, carnivorous theropods cohabited with herbivorous sauropods. A new food chain was emerging. To get a better idea of these evolutions in the different ecological niches, let's take off for present-day Europe. Between 230 million and 220 million years ago, if you had lived on this part of Pangea, you could have come across Plateosaurus, a herbivore, but also Herrerasaurus, a carnivore. So be careful. After all, our carnivore is almost 3 meters or 10 feet long and weighs no less than 90 kilograms or 200 pounds. According to scientists, Herrerasaurus and its cousins, like the Styracosaurus, are, if not the ancestors of all dinosaurs, at least the closest relatives of this common ancestor, which is no mean feat. Herrerasaurus is one of the earliest genera of dinosaurs. From what we know, it's likely that the common ancestor of dinosaurs was a carnivore. However, the evolution of the lineage led to a herbivorous genus, the sauropodomorphs, which in turn led to the sauropods. Herrerasaurus is the ideal candidate to take over from the predatory archosaurs that reigned supreme just a few thousand years ago. Because of its height, there are very few to rival it. He is undoubtedly one of the region's alpha predators. His skeleton is built for the hunt. It all starts with its long, flexible, and powerful hind legs. Once he's chosen his prey, a juvenile or a lone animal, he stalks it, racing after it, pursuing it relentlessly. It's as much a game as a strategy that pays off for him. He doesn't let up, and the prey tires more and more. Out of breath, disoriented, she loses her rhythm and drops her guard. This is when the carnivore deploys his other trump cards. He uses his claws, but above all, his jaw. In addition to its sharp-pointed teeth, it can move its jaw back and forth thanks to its cartilage. The blows it delivers to its victim are always fatal. It shreds, it lacerates, it slashes, causing hemorrhaging, gaping wounds, and certain death. Despite its undisputed predatory qualities, it lacked a number of features that other, more evolved dinosaurs would later acquire. Herrerasaurus does not have the same metabolism. After its meal, it needs to rest, preferably in the sun, to recharge its batteries. Its hunting methods are very energy-intensive, and it needs a kind of lethargy to survive. Particularly during the dry season, when in addition to enduring the heat and lack of water, it has to find prey to feed on. Not so the Celophysis we saw earlier. This dinosaur, much smaller than Herrerasaurus, is better adapted to its environment and the harsh climate of the dry season. Its lungs, but also its heart, are more advanced and therefore more efficient. It withstands drought much better than other animals of the time, especially large predators like Herrerasaurus. So it was during this period that Celophysis reproduced. At any rate, this is one of the theories put forward by researchers. It's also assumed that, as with some modern animals, males had to fight to ensure offspring and prove their strength and vitality to other females. After laying their eggs in nests dug in the ground, they cover them up. After several days or even weeks of incubation, the first young hatch. This time, two hypotheses can be put forward. The first, as with some reptiles, is that the young fend for themselves as soon as they emerge from the egg. Others, as is the case with many birds, believe that the young are fed and protected by their parents for the first few days. In the case of Celophysis, which is still very primitive, the theory of resourcefulness is undoubtedly the most plausible. Let's take a look at the first dinosaurs of the Triassic period with their different diets, vegetarians. With the blazing sun at the height of the dry season, these animals are not at the wedding and have to fight every day to find enough to eat. After a few difficult months, the first rains arrive and the plant cover quickly comes back to life. Plateosaurus belongs to the prosauropod group. It was the largest dinosaur of its time, so it richly deserves its place in this video in Dinosaurland. In the Triassic, it was the only dinosaur able to reach the tops of spindly trees. It uses its front legs like hands to block branches. Ingenious, isn't it, for such a primitive animal? As you can see, as early as the Triassic period, the first dinosaurs weren't nearly as clumsy as we might have thought. Thanks to its hands, but also to its great size, it can almost easily reach the leaves of trees, rising 3 meters or 10 feet high. Little known to the general public, he is one of the very first land giants. At 8 meters or 26 feet long and weighing 4 tons, it had to eat several kilos of food every day to meet its energy requirements. Unlike our carnivore, which is more bipedal, it uses its forelegs on the ground to move around. Occasionally, if the situation is critical, it will run on 2 legs in the hope of gaining a little speed. It's hard to move such a silhouette. With its long neck, small head, and elongated body, it's clear that it's not cut out for sprinting or hunting. He's a herbivore, peaceful and tranquil, who longs only to savor those few tender leaves in the treetops. While it chews nonchalantly on these precious leaves, the evolution of dinosaurs continues. In the Jurassic, it even took on a new lease of life. Dinosaurs from this period populate the majority of the world's landmass and have diversified considerably. It's time to see for yourself. If the Jurassic period can be considered a springboard for the development of the dinosaur group, it's important to qualify this statement. The lower Jurassic period is a bit peculiar. You may not know it, but at the end of the Triassic, a mass extinction raged on Earth. nature underwent radical changes that a few plants and many animal species were unable to survive. Plants are the ones that recover most easily and quickly. Animals take a little longer. The first part of the Jurassic was therefore a period of calm, with no major radiation. Here is the landscape you could admire from 201 to 174 million years ago in the lower Jurassic. Dinosaurs coexisted and evolved for a handful of million years. Some species have scarcely hatched when they have already disappeared. Others appear and take their place. An ecological niche never remains empty for long, and nature soon reclaims its rights. Although a few dinosaur species appeared in the Triassic, and the large sauropod and theropod groups were already taking shape by 170 million years ago, i.e. in the Middle Jurassic, which extends to 163 million years ago, these dinosaur groups experienced a meteoric rise. This boom was to continue well into the Upper Jurassic. Dinosaurs weren't the only ones on the upswing. Marine reptiles and pterosaurs, the flying reptiles, also experienced an impressive period of radiation. Geographically, things are getting a little more hectic on our planet. The Earth is gradually splitting into two continents, a slow dislocation that will continue throughout the period. A rift appears between the northern and southern hemispheres, and the sea rushes in with all the power it can muster. The rock bends under its repeated assaults, and the fault becomes an ever-widening gaping hole. The waltz of the continents and the dance of the tectonic plates play their most beautiful score again and again, creating new landscapes and new environments. The Earth is being torn apart, yet ecologically speaking, we're far from the chaos we might imagine. Biodiversity has never been so rich and diverse on the continent. If you look at the carpet of vegetation that covers the land, you can see that it is more extensive and more developed than ever before. Look around this clearing and you'll see undergrowth taking shape. This small forest already shows different strata or levels, with dense, well-stocked plant cover in the lowest part. The higher you climb, the sparser the plant cover. As you can imagine, such a wealth of plants encourages a wide variety of animals. Insects, of course, but also small mammals and the famous dinosaurs, the main protagonists of our video. In the Middle Jurassic, dinosaurs fully dominated the Earth. Without further ado, let's move on to 150 million years ago, a pivotal period when these animals from another time greatly diversified. Dinosaurs of all kinds can be found here: bipedal, quadrupedal, feathered, and even carapace dinosaurs. Look at this one. It's an ornithischian. Remember, we talked about two distinct groups of dinosaurs, the Saurischians, with their pubes facing forwards, and the ornithischians with their pubes facing backwards. The Saurischians would later give rise to the sauropods and theropods. Some were herbivores, others formidable carnivores. The ornithischians, on the other hand, were all herbivores. Victims of numerous predators, they had to develop defensive stratagems. For many of them, bone plates will be their best asset in battle. Such is the case of our Stegosaurus, a dinosaur belonging to the theriophores, i.e., dinosaurs with shields. The Stegosaurus's shield is instantly recognizable and highly effective. You can easily make out the Stegosaurus's silhouette. The double row of bony plates on its back and its long tail are truly distinctive. Measuring around 4 meters or 13 feet in height, and 8 meters or 26 feet in height, and weighing in at 3 tons, it didn't go unnoticed on the plains. A giant? For its time, despite its considerable size, it couldn't really be called a giant. If you look at giant sauropods such as Brachiosaurs or Diplodocus, he looks pretty puny. Nevertheless, Stegosaurus has always fascinated mankind. Numerous studies have been carried out to learn more about its lifestyle. Scientists are particularly interested in the usefulness of its bone plates. Contrary to popular belief, they do not play a defensive role, in the sense that in the event of an attack they are quite useless. It was long thought that they were a means of regulating temperature. Highly vascularized, the blood circulates perfectly in the plates, so they can either warm the body by capturing the sun's heat or cool it if it shakes its plates like a fan. In recent years, another type of hypothesis has emerged among scientists. According to them, by gorging themselves with blood, the plates took on a bright red hue in order to impress predators. They were supposed to retreat before they had even attempted anything. Unable to run, nature endowed it with deterrent rather than defensive attributes. Slow and clumsy, the Stegosaurus was vulnerable and easy prey for predators. However, although it lacks the sharp teeth of certain large carnivores, such as this Allosaurus that seems to be salivating in anticipation of our Stegosaurus's flanks, the latter has a tail that can quickly become a formidable defensive weapon, provided the experienced adult uses it with power and precision. This is not always the case with juvenile, aged, or weakened Stegosaurus. In the case of this male in his prime, however, his tail may be just the thing. Equipped with 4 spikes that can reach between 40 centimeters or 16 inches and 1 meter or 3 feet, the Stegosaurus's tail is transformed into a cannonball, armed with powerful spears. He has to aim and take advantage of a second's inattention, or the predator won't protect his weak points. If he succeeds, he has a chance of survival. Another very special physical characteristic of the Stegosaurus: the size of its brain. It's no bigger than a walnut. Incredible for such a large animal to have such a small brain, isn't it? For many years it was thought that brain size was proportional to intelligence. In other words, in addition to being vulnerable, slow, and clumsy, the Stegosaurus was considered stupid. We now know that size has nothing to do with intellectual capacity. Today's animals have modest-sized brains and are highly intelligent. The Stegosaurus was far from stupid. This browsing animal, which fed on low-growing plants, ferns, and cycads, lived not far from the big, long-necked sauropods like Brachiosaurus. Perhaps it thought that drowned in the mass, it had a way of slipping through the net of some of the Allosaurus rampant in the region. Let's leave the latter to discover one of the most popular long necks of the Jurassic, the Brachiosaurus. There are many other giant sauropods, most of them native to South America, such as Argentinosaurus or Gigantosaurus. Brachiosaurus, however, is the only one for which scientists have an almost complete skeleton. Nicknamed leaf eaters, Brachiosaurus have a morphology somewhat similar to that of the giraffe. They have long necks, but if you look closely at the legs, you'll notice that the front legs are longer than the hind ones. This enabled them to extend their necks to reach the tops of tall trees. It weighs between 50 and 80 tons and measures almost 25 meters or 82 feet in length. With a height at the withers of 6 meters or 20 feet and a long neck of almost 9 meters or 30 feet, it could reach a height of 12 meters or 40 feet. They are among the heaviest land animals the Earth has ever known. Our largest animal specimens live in the ocean, taking advantage of the water's buoyancy. Brachiosaurs, on the other hand, travels on dry land. Their living environment posed questions for many years. Such weight on land was almost unimaginable. And then its high nostrils supported this idea. Like a crocodile, it breathed with its head slightly above water. And yet, all the results of studies carried out on the subject lead to the same conclusion. Brachiosaurus is a land animal. Why are we so sure of this? Because its lungs would not have withstood the pressure of water for very long, given the depth required for the animal to be submerged. Breathing would have been difficult. The lungs would not have been able to expand, the animal would have suffocated, and blood pressure would have soared, leading to heart failure. What's more, the stomach remains show traces of tree leaves, so he was feeding on land, and considering his needs, he spent a lot of time there. So how does it manage to move this colossal body mass if water doesn't help? Well, to understand this, we need to look at his skeleton. First of all, despite his imposing stature and extraordinary dimensions, his bones are robust, but not massive. And that changes everything. This light skeleton allows him to be supported without being weighed down and slowed down in his movements. Some bones, such as the vertebrae here, are hollowed out and separated by partitions and bone reinforcements. These vast cavities help to save weight. It's as if the animal has been fitted with light armor to support its movements. Based on studies carried out by researchers on the animal's skeleton, scientists estimated that it was capable of moving at a speed of around 19 to 31 kilometers per hour, i.e. a speed of around 12 to 20 miles per hour. By way of comparison, humans walk at an average of 5 kilometers per hour or 3 miles per hour, so Brachiosaurus is pretty dandy in this respect. But then why does he have such high nostrils? Brachiosaurus has arch-shaped nasal bones. These bones no doubt helped it to push vegetation aside to reach the desired soft leaf. However, the high position of the nostrils, in addition to the arch of the bones being extremely useful in its search for food, has another advantage. When grabbing large leaves or foraging through vegetation, it can still breathe easily and efficiently, as it has exceptionally large nostrils for such a small head. Other hypotheses have also been put forward concerning the nostrils. The first concerns how Brachiosaurus was able to cool its body. As the nostrils are highly vascularized, the blood could be cooled by breathing in the shade of trees while quietly eating his meal. Other scientists believe that the nostrils may have been covered by a flexible chamber that amplified sound, warning of danger. Speaking of danger, despite its size, some carnivores didn't hesitate to take their chances, not on adults but on nests or tiny babies. Brachiosaurus is thought to have lived in herds, at least one male for every few females. Solidarity was the order of the day. When predators, often small and living in packs, tried their luck with the juveniles, the female Brachiosaurus snapped her long tail to frighten off the adversary and sweep him away if necessary. Other females, and even the male, could come to the aid of a member of the troop if the situation became critical. Then, once calm had been restored, everyone returned to their occupations, or rather to their meals, since most of this giant's occupations were closely linked to eating. Let's take a look at the teeth of Brachiosaurus to understand how it feeds. Look closely at this young male, moving through meadows filled with ferns, benetites, coniferous forests, groves of cycas and ginkgos. He grabs the leaf and pulls. It has spatulate teeth with beveled edges that enable it to cut leaves. With a quick tug, the leaf is torn apart. But if you look closely, you'll see that Brachiosaurus doesn't chew. He simply can't, because he doesn't have the teeth and jaw for it. He grabs, pulls, and swallows whole, using his tongue to push the food down his digestive tract. But how does he digest? Well, it uses small stones called gastroliths to help it knead its food and get the best out of it. Even so, given its colossal size and diminutive head, and the low nutritional value of the plant foods it ate, Brachiosaurus was no doubt obliged to spend its days eating. It needed an astronomical amount of food to meet its energy requirements. Let's leave this giant herbivore behind and meet another terrestrial inhabitant of the Jurassic. It's the complete opposite of Brachiosaurus. Firstly, he's a carnivore, and secondly, he weighs just 3 kilograms or 7 pounds. Compsognathus is a genus of small dinosaurs in the Saurischian order and theropod suborder. It's one of the smallest dinosaurs the Earth has ever known, but that doesn't stop it from being very interesting to discover. It looks a bit like a bird and has a few tricks up its sleeve when it comes to hunting insects and small vertebrates. It has 3 toes on its forelegs, which are equipped with claws. Its name means elegant jaw. Its teeth are curved and serrated, ideal for seizing prey. It also has a long tail. It's useless for hunting, but it does give him a great deal of stability, especially when cornering. It acts as a counterweight. In other words, this is a bipedal dinosaur that is agile, lively, and very dexterous. It is also reputed to be fast. From what scientists have been able to observe on its skeleton, notably on its long, slender hind legs, and by comparing this data with other present-day birds, they have estimated Compsognathus to be capable of running at up to 64 kilometers per hour, or 40 miles per hour. We know or have known fast animals on Earth, but none of them were bipedal. The ostrich reached 55 kilometers per hour, or 35 miles per hour, while the T-Rex could only go up to 29 kilometers per hour, or 18 miles per hour. The Compsognathus is one of a kind, and can cover 100 meters or 330 feet in less than 6 seconds. Between its speed and its small size, Compsognathus has the best cards for coping with the predators of its time. Scientists believe this is why the species has evolved in this way. It's agile and stealthy, and can quickly get out of a tight spot with its unfailing flexibility and speed. It's also possible that our little congener lived in a group and behaved socially. Fossils of several individuals in close proximity to one another suggest a well-established group dynamic. Did they hunt in packs, protect each other, and establish a means of communication? Did they use vocalizations or movements? In Compsognathus, we can see the presence of a syrinx, a vocal organ. While many vertebrates are able to produce sound via the larynx and vocal cords, today's birds use the syrinx. This organ, located between the trachea and the branching of the 2 large bronchi, is made up of membranes that vibrate and produce sound as air passes through them. The structure of the syrinx can vary considerably from one avian family to another, and is even an important criterion for classification. It is particularly complex in songbirds, enabling them to create impressive melodies. In Compsognathus, it's difficult to know more at the moment. We can, however, imagine social behaviors in which vocalizations play a predominant role in a Compsognathus group, enabling them to signal danger in the territory, coordinate the group, or attract a mate. In addition to this vocal organ, scientists had already brought to light another organ suggesting that Compsognathus had a high social aptitude. It's the brain. Based on studies carried out on the subject, researchers seriously believe that this little dinosaur was as intelligent as it was fast. Its problem-solving skills enabled it to navigate complex environments, search for food, and recognize social relationships within its group. If until now we thought that dinosaurs weren't very maternal, we've changed our minds with Compsognathus. That's right, its social aptitude also leaves a window open to many other behaviors, including parental care and nesting. Compsognathus is far from being the only dinosaur to be granted this parenting trait. Other dinosaurs, contrary to popular belief, were good parents, caring for their offspring with gentleness and patience. But to meet them, we have to go back to the Cretaceous. The end of the Cretaceous corresponds to the end of the dinosaurs. At this time, 6 continents begin to form. Although the Cretaceous symbolizes the end of their reign on Earth, this doesn't mean that they didn't exist at that time. On the contrary, they were highly diversified and had experienced great radiation, like the ceratopsians, for example. At that time, the Earth was much warmer than it is today. For example, there is no ice at the North or South poles. Sea levels often varied during the Cretaceous period, but on the whole they were generally much higher than they are today, up to 170 meters, or 560 feet higher than today. This favored the creation of shallow seas in places that are completely dry today. Another surprising fact is the place of vegetation. If I say temperate rainforest, the first word that comes to mind probably isn't Antarctica, is it? And yet it's here that you could observe conifers in the Cretaceous period. There were trees such as podocarps, araucarias, ginkgos, cycads, and even ferns. Among the animals, there's one group that stands out: the mammals. But anything over a meter in length is a dinosaur. It was dinosaurs that really conquered the entire landmass in the latter part of the Mesozoic era. You've probably heard of the Triceratops, the most popular of the bunch. But before him, there were many species that gradually led to the development of the genus. It all starts with a dinosaur far removed from the group, a member of the Stegosaurus. It has a distinctive beak on the front of its mouth. A biped, this herbivore fed not only on plants but also on seeds and other natural wonders. Yes, plant cover is much richer and more diversified, especially now in the Cretaceous. Numerous species such as insects, but also plant eaters like our Stegosaurus, will take advantage of this windfall and occupy new ecological niches. To help him digest, he uses the ancestral technique of gastroliths. In other words, he swallows a stone, which kneaded in this way in his stomach, will get to the bottom of the solid food he has ingested. Our gourmand is not above eating plants, roots, and nuts at any time of the day or night. In fact, the latest studies on the subject, notably the analysis of sclerotic rings located in the orbit of the eye, suggest that Stegosaurs lived much like today's birds and reptiles, active for short periods of time, but over a fairly wide time span. Although these adaptations enabled them to feed and reproduce, they also faced numerous dangers. Predators are on the prowl, and they're charismatic to say the least. Stegosaurus is no match for the region's most fearsome predators. A few million years later, a slightly more advanced member of the Ceratops family, Coreoceratops, appeared in South Korea. According to scientists specializing in this genus, it lies between Archaeoceratops, one of the most primitive and basic ceratopsians, and Triceratops. Unlike the Stegosaurus, here the head is beginning to display its first defensive protective bones. But the biped is still very weak in the face of such powerful carnivores. With the Protoceratops, on the other hand, we're beginning to see an evolution that changes the course of things. The balance is more equitable. While the predators remain as powerful as ever, imposing as much by their size as by their hunting attributes, the Protoceratops play on their ability to defend themselves. A solid skull and a united herd. The Protoceratops has a beak-like snout, but its head is also surrounded by a ruff. They use this as a breastplate to protect themselves from bites and claws. Velociraptors know the gaps, leap onto the ruff, and dig their saber-sharp claws into the neck. Within seconds, the fight is over. The only way to counter these relentless predators is to stand together. United we stand, divided we fall. This old adage has never been truer than it is today for this young Protoceratops. The adults, especially the males, come to lend a hand. Velociraptors aren't the type to take unnecessary risks and drop their breakfast. Other opportunities will present themselves. They know it. From now on, the ceratopsids will gain in power. Their heads, armed with horns and a bony collar, enable these large herbivores to press predators against the rock in the event of an attack, for example. They are also much larger than their distant ancestors. They also quickly realized that numbers were the most effective protection against large predators, notably the fearsome Tyrannosaurus rex. A herd could easily number 100 or even 1,000 individuals. The ruff is robust and powerful, but it's with its powerful horns that it doesn't hesitate to skewer its adversary. Its highly developed survival instinct, the group effect, and its new defensive assets enable it to rival powerful and ferocious predators such as the Tyrannosaurus. With horns out front, the Triceratops threatens him, keeping him at bay and playing on his fear and perseverance until the enemy forfeits and goes elsewhere to find his next meal. Now that the group has calmed down, we're off to another part of the world, Normandy to be precise. It was in this region of France that new fossil remains were discovered in 2021. They are Calatadraco cotardi. The discovery immediately caused a stir in the world of science. This is the first large carnivore of its kind on the European continent. Its morphology no doubt reminds you of someone. It looks like a Tyrannosaurus. You could say it's a distant cousin. Measuring almost 6 meters or 20 feet long, it has a large tail and small arms. On the other hand, while Tyrannosaurus conquered North America and Central Asia, Calatadraco lived in South America and moved into present-day Africa and Europe. They're close, yet they probably never crossed paths. Fortunately for both of them. A few miles away in Spain, the year 2024 also brought great revelations and the unraveling of other prehistoric mysteries. Fossils revealed as long ago as 2007 finally found a clearly identified owner on September 4, 2024. Quincasora pintaquinestra. The dinosaur still has a lot to tell us. We still have relatively little information on the evolution of these giants of the terrestrial world and their migration and exchange of fauna between continents. Thanks to this specimen, we may soon have some answers about the European members of the group. Along with other dinosaurs found at the site, it will add to the information we have about this place at this particular time. Scientists are attempting to reconstruct the ecosystem of this Cretaceous stage, with its flora and fauna, but also its climate, landscapes, and species interactions. Returning to our discovery, and Quincasara pentaquiniestra, like all titanosaurs, it is characterized by a long neck, a long tail, a stocky but short body, and a small head in proportion to the rest of the body. In addition to supporting their weight, the skeletons of these large quadrupedal herbivores also serve as a defense against predators. Their robust bone structure is their best asset. We could even go so far as to say that titanosaurs represent the apogee of sauropod evolution. Thanks to their enormous size, they were almost invulnerable. Almost because some predators, more daring than others, undoubtedly tried to take on the Colossus. Gigantosaurus was one of them. Bold but not mad, he only attacked juveniles or animals weakened by old age or disease. A healthy member of the group in his prime would have used his tail to scare off the enemy. We can't talk about the Cretaceous and its evolution without mentioning the Iguanodontidae. It was in this group of animals that the first developments in chewing mechanisms were noted. Until now, herbivorous dinosaurs, even the largest ones like Titanosaurs, used gastroliths to help them digest large quantities of plant matter. Lacking the dentition to cut and chew, they needed the help of stones to ease the stomach's workload. Rather than simply swallowing food like other reptiles, this group of dinosaurs developed a more complex jaw, gradually diversifying their teeth to chew efficiently. In the Cretaceous, there were a dozen different iguanodon genera. One example is Iguanodon bernissartensis. A quadruped, it has a massive body weighing over 3 tons. Depending on the specimen, it can measure up to 10 meters or 33 feet in length. Although it walks easily on all 4 legs, it can also run on 2. This is useful for fleeing from predators. To maintain its balance, as its mass remains quite imposing, its heavy, rigid tail helps to balance the weight at the front and back of the body. One of the most striking features of this species is its spurred thumb. It has a sort of clawed horn that helps it search for food. It also has a 5th finger on its hand. It is rather flexible and helps him to grasp a branch, for example. It is particularly fond of ferns, cycads, and conifers. In the Cretaceous, duck-billed dinosaurs are also found, known as Hadrosaurs. The latter had hundreds of tiny, but terribly effective teeth for crushing plants. You could almost say that they are the cows of today's pastures. They gobble up large quantities of plants every day to meet their energy needs. One of them is called Parasaurolophus. It's a large ornithopod measuring almost 9 meters or 30 feet long and weighing around 5 tons, so it needs a lot of tree leaves and pine needles to sustain it. Despite its height, to reach the richest and tastiest thorns and leaves, it sometimes has to pull itself up on 2 legs to gain a few extra centimeters. After eating several kilos of leaves, he moves on all 4s to the next tree to resume his meal. Yes, he really does eat a lot. This gourmand is renowned not only for his appetite, but also for his crest. Its name actually means lizard crest. It's quite unique. The crest is hollow. It's as if an empty tube ran from the nostrils along the head, looping back to the top of the skull. However original and aesthetically pleasing, the Parasaurolophus crest still raises questions. What could it have been used for? Well, to be honest, we don't really know. Several hypotheses have been put forward, but after so many years it's hard to put them to the test. Scientists base their hypotheses not only on skeletal studies, but also on the data and knowledge we have on current and recent animals. By comparing and contrasting these data and knowledge, we can think that the crest was used to identify other members of its species. It may also have been a means of communication. Parasaurolophus could blow air into the tube, creating sounds of varying volume. It could communicate with a conspecific or sexual partner, but also warn of danger. If it saw a Gorgosaurus or a Daspletosaurus, chances are it would blow its trumpet very loudly. Another possibility is thermoregulation. It's even possible that the crest was a Swiss Army knife for our dinosaur, serving all these purposes at once. Let's leave our Parasaurolophus to meet another exceptional dinosaur, Maiasaura. He too belongs to the Hadrosaurus family. It has a duck-like beak and a characteristically thick snout. It also has a small crest just above its eyes. It is about 3 meters or 10 feet high, 9 meters or 30 feet long, and weighs 2 tons. Just before entering the Cretaceous, we were talking about Compsognathus, a dinosaur capable of socialization and undoubtedly with a parental streak. He's not the only one, and Maiasaura is the epitome of this. We now know that some dinosaurs lived in herds. This is true of the Titanosaurs we have seen, but unlike the Titanosaurs, which may have numbered a few dozen individuals, Maiasauras numbered several thousand. Adults, juveniles, and newborns form a large aggregation. They live and move in groups, providing a means of defense against predators. They were the regular target of the Troodon, for example, which fed on fruits and seeds, but also on eggs and newborns. Speaking of eggs, just look at how carefully prepared this nest is. The female, Maiasaura, has taken the time necessary to create a cozy, secure nest for her unborn young. She can lay up to 40 eggs, hence the rather large circumference. Her eggs were the size of an ostrich's, but how could they resist their mother's weight? She found a way to keep them warm and ensure their survival. She covered the inside of the nest with vegetation. With this thick carpet, the eggs are well hidden and sheltered. As the vegetation begins to rot, it provides moisture and warmth, keeping the young warm and providing food when the eggs hatch. Some reptiles would have stopped parenting at this point, but not Maiasaura. She takes care of her young. Fossil sites show numerous young and juveniles close to their parents. Maiasauras remain in the herd until adulthood. Let's take a look at another extraordinary creature that lived on our planet millions of years ago. This is undoubtedly one of the largest animals ever to walk the Earth. In the Jurassic period, sauropod giants dominated the land, but in the Cretaceous, some set new records, like Patagotitan. This titanosaur measures around 37 meters or 120 feet in length. It's almost unimaginable to think that such a behemoth was able to get around. Such a gigantic creature in today's world would be unthinkable. Everything seems so much more difficult with such an imposing wingspan. Getting around, but also supporting one's own weight, requires phenomenal energy. So why has nature led these animals to such a significant evolution in their measurements? There are 2 plausible hypotheses. The first is that the big dinosaurs couldn't really run. To protect themselves from predators, they had to find another way. In the end, size was one of them. Bigger prey made it harder to attack. Predators evolve and become more imposing, while prey themselves gain in mass to maintain a certain balance, and so on. This is how, some 75 million years ago, we found ourselves faced with a giant of over 30 meters or 100 feet crossing the plains. Another hypothesis relates to the nature of the gases. We know that oxygen levels, for example, can influence the size of insects. It may be that the nature of the gases, but also their levels at that particular time, could have influenced the size of sauropods. Let's take a look at how these animals survived in these verdant lands. With such a huge wingspan, Patagosaurus must surely have had astronomical dietary requirements. Yes, indeed, he eats a lot. When it hatches from its football-sized egg, it doesn't weigh much. By adulthood, however, it will weigh close to 60 tons. It grows very fast and has to eat a lot to fuel its growth. One might think that these animals must have had a negative impact on their environment. Would a herd of behemoths like this one have to ravage everything in its path with their insatiable appetite and need for energy? Well, not necessarily. In fact, scientists believe that its metabolism is very greedy as a juvenile, but calms down a little as an adult. It eats, yes, but its needs are less important. Growth is over, and it's simply a matter of keeping fit. As an adult, Patagosaurus has a slower metabolism, and above all can make do with lower quality plant matter without any problems. So these big beasts don't necessarily have a negative impact on the environment, especially as they play a small part in its development. While Patagosaurus readily feeds on low-nutrient leaves, it is also very fond of cones. Unlike leaves, which contain cellulose, cones contain seeds and therefore starch. In other words, a single cone is more filling than a handful of leaves. But going a step further, what's interesting to analyze is the possible parallel between today's pachyderms and giants such as Patagosaurus. When Patagosaurus feeds on cones, the seeds travel through its intestine and end up in its excrement. In this way, it contributes to the modulation and enrichment of its environment. It's like an architect of nature. Speaking of nature and plants, we spoke earlier of ferns and conifers. These plants provide shelter and food, not only for herbivores, but also for insects, mammals, and reptiles. Although many plants are edible, not all are. Their toxicity is their weapon of defense. Our Patagosaurus, majestic and imposing though he may be, knows this better than anyone here. He wouldn't eat just any tree leaf. The cycadales, for example, contain a large number of poisonous species, and still do today. The bonititails have opted for a different strategy. The cones are integrated directly into the trunk to curb the ardor of certain herbivores. Others, such as Araucaria araucana, have built up a veritable shield against the teeth of herbivores. Its seeds are covered by thick leaves, full of scales, and above all, sharp. No tongue could resist it. While the technique may have paid off, since the plant's robustness and armoring have undoubtedly enabled it to survive these millions of years, many plants and animals will not be able to overcome the chain of disasters that are about to unfold. We are now at the end of the Cretaceous, and a major event is about to shake up the established order and redistribute the cards of life on Earth. The disappearance of the dinosaurs was due to multiple causes, a series of events and consequences that indisputably led to their demise. While we may still have doubts about the accuracy of the sequence of events, we are certain of one thing: the Yucatan meteorite played a part in the disappearance of the dinosaurs. Recently, researchers have been able to unravel some of the mysteries surrounding not only the consequences of the meteorite's impact, but also its origin. After so many years to get the rock to speak to us, we're going to have to use various stratagems. Chemistry will be our best ally this time. It's the rock's deep-seated composition that will enable us to go back in time to its origins. After an in-depth study of the chemical elements present in the vicinity of the Chicxulub crater in Yucatan, scientists detected the presence of ruthenium. Now, ruthenium is an extremely rare component on the Earth's surface. It's extremely rare because it's part of our planet's composition, and for this reason it's found in its core. In other words, if the element ruthenium is found somewhere on the Earth's surface, it must have come from somewhere else, somewhere in the universe. So far, nothing extraordinary. The presence of this element just confirms that an extraterrestrial element has come crashing down on Earth. Scientists have done a colossal amount of work, however, in the study of this element, and to be more precise, this atom, because yes, it's on this infinitely small scale that everything is played out to understand the past. By measuring the isotopic ratio, i.e. the proportions of the different forms of atoms, known in scientific jargon as isotopes. Simply put, these atoms have the same number of electrons and protons, but a different number of neutrons. The shape changes according to the origins of these atoms, revealing valuable clues about their owners. Initially, the possibility of a comet was ruled out, while that of an asteroid was favored. In fact, the isotope ratios currently known for comets do not match the data acquired from the Yucatan crater. Many asteroids lie between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. In fact, this is the origin of other asteroids that have collided with the Earth, such as Tunguska in Siberia and Rochouart in France. However, as for the asteroid that caused the death of the dinosaurs, here again, the trail has been ruled out. According to research, the isotope ratios are too different for this hypothesis to hold. This means that the asteroid came from even further away, beyond Jupiter. This very ancient celestial body is a carbonaceous chondrite, a very primitive meteorite if you want to put it another way. It dates back to the very origins of the solar system, as it has not evolved since. With such characteristics, the Yucatan asteroid is both exceptional and unpredictable. Today, asteroids in the belt, sometimes called near-Earth asteroids, pass in the wake of our planet on a regular basis. Scientists can therefore calculate and anticipate events. With an asteroid so far away, no anticipation would have been possible, even today. Now that we know more or less where it came from, let's take a look at the consequences of its arrival on Earth. This is the asteroid in question. It's at full speed and making contact with the atmosphere. Collision is imminent. The force of the impact creates a crater over 180 kilometers in diameter. The deflagration is so powerful that flora and fauna are swept away in the wake of the dust, and earth and rock are lifted up for miles around. The impact and ensuing blast will trigger a gigantic tsunami, a destructive tsunami, with waves of up to 1.5 kilometers or 1 mile high. The atmosphere heats up considerably within a fraction of a second of the collision. Fires broke out all over the place. They were widespread, and the surrounding heat was unlikely to extinguish them. During the impact, the rock that rose from the earth to reach the sky became loaded with sulfur. A thick cloud of dust stretches for miles and miles. Sunlight will never again penetrate these clouds for months to come. However, these sulfur-laden clouds will cause acid rain to flood the earth. This diabolical rain will then finish off the few survivors. 75% of all species will disappear. The non-avian dinosaurs, which have reigned supreme on Earth for millions of years, are sadly among the long list of species to become extinct in the aftermath of the asteroid. The tremendous evolution in radiation experienced by these animals, from the arrival of the first archosaurians to the diversification of the largest tetrapods and sauropods, has been swept away forever. Despite their disappearance, these animals continue to fascinate us to this day. Every day we learn more about the thousands of species that inhabited the Earth before us. If we thought they were just big animals, a bit silly and very aggressive, we now know that this is not the case. Some of them, like Compsognathus, communicated. They were small and agile, but also intelligent and protective. Others, like Maiasaura, were known to be protective parents and involved in raising their young. Giants like the Titanosaurs lived in groups and protected each other. When we think of dinosaurs, we also imagine them to be cold-blooded and covered in scales. But they were warm-blooded, and many of them also had feathers. They range in size from small to gigantic. While some walk on 4 legs, others are short on 2. Dinosaurs are far from the basic representation we had of them just a few decades ago. Thanks to their extraordinary abilities and aptitudes, they have managed to adapt to their environment over thousands of years. In the aftermath of the impact, however, they bowed their heads and gave way. They left us modern birds as a legacy, as if to leave a trace of their passage on Earth. This is the law of nature. When an ecological niche becomes vacant, surviving species will fill the void to maintain the balance of life. Dinosaurs give way to other kinds of animals. Animals that are very close to us. Mammals. The first members of the group were far from resembling those we know today, and their conquest of the terrestrial world was far from one. But that's another story. The meteoric impact that took place at the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary is a perfectly established fact of Earth history. A huge asteroid the size of Everest hits the atmosphere at an exceptional speed of nearly 65,000 kilometers per hour, or 40,000 miles per hour. With its diameter of more than 10 kilometers or 6 miles and its weight of 1 billion tons, it smashes into the province of Yucatan in the Gulf of Mexico. The energy released is immeasurable. This asteroid hits the mainland and forms a crater 30 kilometers or 20 miles deep. The impact is so great that the rock of the Earth's crust liquefies. Within a radius of 60 kilometers or 40 miles around the impact, all the existing water is transformed into vapor. The thousands of animals that were there at the time are killed immediately. Everything happens so fast that they don't even have time to feel anything. These animals die a gentle death, but not those further away, who only see a flash of light. A few seconds after the impact, the shock wave takes shape like a cloud of vaporized rocks, which advances quickly on the ocean. The unbearable heat evaporates everything around. Most animals are killed by the violence of this wave. The most vulnerable are those who can't find shelter quickly. The animals living in caves on the side of a hill and being able to take refuge in a safe place have a chance of survival. Fires break out. The earth goes up in smoke. Dinosaurs, because of their gigantic size, have a lot of difficulties to find a refuge and are vulnerable. The shock wave releases all its energy in about 10 minutes, but it did not cover the whole surface of the Earth. Some animals are unaware of the catastrophe that has just occurred. The consequences will catch up with them. The impact of the meteorite causes a major earthquake. A violent tremor is felt, cracks appear, and landslides occur. The earthquake crosses the whole planet. The tremors of the earthquake are felt for several days, but the worst is yet to come. A giant tsunami, as big as a mountain range, advances towards the coast. It crossed the Atlantic at almost 1,000 kilometers per hour, or 620 miles per hour. The wave comes close to the coast and then crashes on land, carrying animals, trees, and debris in its path. It then retreats with such force that it shapes a new geological landscape. Hills, valleys, and canyons are formed. Dead animals are scattered or washed back into the sea. The tsunami subsides, but the millions of tons of rock that were propelled into space by the impact now fall as meteorites, ranging in size from a pea to a house. Boulders hit the surface of the Earth for several hours, causing the temperature to rise sharply. In less than a day, the cataclysm exterminated almost all the life on planet Earth. Millions of animals are burned alive. Oxygen levels rise on the Earth. The heat increases and the burning accelerates. Amidst the corpses, a few survivors persevere. A few isolated dinosaurs still roam the apocalyptic landscape, trying to survive. The Purgatorius, an ancestor of today's primates, wanders through the flames. While for millions of years it has been preyed upon by dinosaurs, it seems that its physical conditions give it an advantage in surviving the catastrophe. This small mammal is similar to a large mouse that climbs trees. It is at the base of a group that led to species including the great apes and man. This small animal lived in the shadow of the dinosaurs. It organized its life discreetly by feeding on insects and fruits found in forest habitats. It can now take advantage of the ecological niches left free by the dinosaurs to diversify. Clouds of ash and chemical elements released during the impact clump together and gradually veil the sky. Sulfur was produced in large quantities during the impact. This element now comes into contact with the water in the atmosphere and is transformed into sulfuric acid. A deadly rain falls on the Earth. The surviving animals must take shelter because the sulfuric acid burns the skin and flesh. The showers also hit the ocean. The clouds present in great quantity gradually mask the sunlight. The Earth is plunged into darkness. The plankton that needs constant light is slowly dying out. The dinosaurs, which use their visual sense for the most part, are heavily handicapped by this new condition. Darkness will reign for several weeks. The small mammals that lived alongside the dinosaurs had already developed nocturnal faculties. Indeed, they hunted mostly at night to avoid being preyed upon by the giants. They therefore have a major advantage in facing the interminable night that sets in. The vegetation also suffers the effect of the cataclysm. The plants that had not yet succumbed to the fire are now deprived of sunlight and stop growing. The large herbivores that survived until then see their food sources diminish. After a few months, a cold snap sets in. The earth, once warm and lush, becomes icy and hostile. The Purgatorius isolates itself in its burrow to stay warm. It feeds on everything it finds, and this is what will save its life. All the dinosaurs, whether herbivores or carnivores, succumb to this icy environment, except for the avian dinosaurs. In 1 year, the planet is almost entirely emptied of all life forms. 75% of the species that populated the biosphere disappear. The ocean is empty, except for a few rare species of fish and sharks. Generally speaking, the smaller the animals were, the more likely they were to survive. In a few hours, a few days, a few months, or maybe a few years, the world of the dinosaurs collapses, implying a fundamental change in the ecosystem, since their disappearance will open the way to our distant ancestors. The Earth is like a huge desert. Nevertheless, for the few land animals that survived, it is a new opportunity. Without predators to hunt them down, these few survivors will be able to multiply rapidly. With no more reason to hide, they are ready to settle and repopulate the Earth. The survivors will write a new chapter in their history. The large reptiles disappear from the face of the Earth. Other orders survive with very small populations. 4 orders of reptiles remain, with turtles, crocodiles, snakes, and lizards. 98% of colonial coral species that inhabited warm, shallow tropical waters are disappearing. Solitary corals that establish themselves in colder, deeper regions have fared better. Cephalopods, echinoderms, and bivalves are seeing their number of genera decrease. Ammonites and belemnites disappeared, like all the other species of mollusks of the cephalopod class. The only survivors are the nautiloids, represented today by the nautilus, and another group to which the octopods, squids, and cuttlefish belong. The base of the food chain has been affected. In the absence of light, plants wither away. Large herbivores are deprived of food. At sea, the food chains are disrupted in the same way. The plankton having disappeared, all those who fed on it die of hunger. The small, debris-eating animals are used to feeding on plant debris, and small animals living in the mud. Even if all the plants die, the aquatic fauna can survive for a long time. Moreover, they are also able to withstand dry spells. Well hidden in the mud of fresh water, they spend their life in slow motion. On land, these debris eaters manage to find animal corpses, seeds, or plant debris to survive for a few months. Combined with their ability to hibernate, they are more efficient in resisting hostile conditions. Another characteristic may allow some animals to better withstand the consequences of the meteorite fall. Mammals and birds are constant temperature species. They are less dependent on the outside temperature and are capable of better survival. Similarly, species that live by the sea are better able to withstand major changes in their environment. Is it luck or a real capacity of adaptation? For living organisms, it is impossible to adapt to such rare and catastrophic events. Natural selection only works if it is slow and weak enough not to cause the immediate death of all the individuals in the species. During the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction, animals are killed at random. If some are favored, it is because they were better able to resist the new living conditions created by the event. After a warm start, the Earth undergoes a clear cooling trend. Tectonics led to a reorganization of the great ocean currents and raised the great reliefs that consumed CO2. Barely 10 million years later, a continental tear in the northern hemisphere releases large quantities of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and the oceans, causing the temperature to rise by at least 5 degrees Celsius. This warming disrupts ecosystems again and has an important influence on the evolution of mammals. The vegetation is transformed, the forests become dense. The last remnant of the supercontinent Gondwana breaks up, forming Australia and Antarctica. Australia takes with it a remarkable fauna and flora, of which we still find some specimens today. This separation causes the creation of a circum-Antarctic current that will isolate the southern continent from warmer waters and cause its freezing. The terrestrial world is now dominated by familiar life forms, such as flowering plants, songbirds, and mammals. In the waters, mammals predominate with whales, seals, and a myriad of modern bony fish. They share the ocean with sharks, which were already present. The explosion of all these groups created the biological world of today. Most of the larger animals have disappeared. The surviving reptiles are rather modest in size, with a few snakes, lizards, small crocodiles, and turtles. Only birds impose themselves by their size and try to reign on the animal world. The Gastornis parisiensis, also called diatryma, and the Teratornis incredibilis are birds with impressive sizes. The Gastornis is the largest bird of its time, growing up to 2 meters or 7 feet for the largest specimens. It has short wings, long legs, and a thick beak. It moves in the manner of today's ostriches, since it is unable to fly. He likes the forests and swamps in the tropical climate. At that time, it is not a prey because its potential predators, mammals or crocodilians, are smaller than it. Its robust beak and powerful claws allow it an omnivorous diet. The Teratornis is nicknamed the monster bird. Its wingspan can reach up to 5 meters or 16 feet, and the surface of one of its wings reaches 17.5 square meters or 190 square feet. At the time, it was the largest bird able to fly. Its strong legs and powerful feet allow it to snatch and catch prey with a very strong grip. These two specimens are only fleeting on the Earth, and the birds that will endure will sport more modest sizes in the future. But for now, these terrifying raptors haunt the savannas. They prefer sparsely vegetated environments that allow them to chase their prey. They capture and devour small mammals, such as primitive horses, but also corpses like modern vultures. As long as mammals remain too small to act as predators, these giant birds have no serious competitors and remain at the top of the food chain. The perissodactyls will be very successful and will include the ancestors of horses, tapirs, and rhinoceroses. The three lineages were one at the time. These animals are different today, but their ancestors were very similar, although they do not occupy the same environments. They do not eat the same plants, which avoids too much competition that could lead to the disappearance of some species. The Hyracotherium is often attacked by these dangerous birds. Although it is a member of the evolutionary lineage of the horse, it is more like a dog at the time. About 60 centimeters or 20 inches long, and no taller than 20 centimeters or 8 inches, it has 4 toes on its forelegs and 3 toes on its hind legs. It does not have hooves like our modern horses, but a kind of paw pads resembling those of dogs. Its 40 or so teeth are used to crush soft leaves and young plant shoots since it is a herbivore. Heptodon lives in North America. This primitive tapir measures 1 meter long. Although its limbs and its skull are similar to those of the current tapirs, it does not yet have their characteristic small trunk. Its close cousin, Hieracius, is one of the first rhinoceroses. It is slightly larger than Heptodon, but does not yet have a horn. Heptodon, Hieracius, and Hyracotherium look very similar at the time, but their lineage will then clearly divide. New mammals appear, including Phenacodus. This medium-sized herbivore vaguely resembles a deer or a modern horse. It occupies the root of the ungulate family tree. It has teeth well adapted to the hard vegetation of its habitat. It is up to 1.5 meters or 5 feet long, has long straight legs and a narrow snout. Each of its limbs ends in 5 full fingers, allowing it to walk like a modern tapir. The 20 claws on its limbs were later modified to become hooves in modern ungulate species. Biodiversity is still very different from today. Even if the forests are present, the grasslands begin to expand and the herbivorous animals develop. Some families of mammals evolve towards new ecological types, such as runners, gliders, even real flying animals, swimmers, jumpers, burrowers. They are distributed over the entire surface of the Earth and occupy all environments, from burning deserts to icy poles. They adapt to treetops, high mountains, oceans, and freshwater swamps. Innovations such as the wings of bats and the large incisors of rodents will prove crucial to their biological success. Brontotherium is a genus of ungulate reminiscent of our modern rhinoceros. It has a pair of horns on its snout, the males being more imposing than the females. Although its appearance brings it closer to the rhinoceros, it reaches the size of an elephant. It measures up to 5 meters in length and weighs up to 5 tons. This herbivore is fond of tender leaves and young shoots. At 1.5 meters or 5 feet long, 80 centimeters or 30 inches high, and 100 kilograms or 220 pounds, Hyracotherium looks like a pony. It is in fact a species of primitive rhinoceros, even though it does not have a horn and is a runner at this time. It feeds on a wide variety of vegetation in the steppes and open forests. Its slender legs rest on 3 fingers, and its head is particularly large compared to the rest of its body. The diversification of herbivores undoubtedly parallels that of carnivorous mammals. Among the groups represented at this time, Hyaenodon, whose name means hyena teeth, appears under its feline appearance. Its massive and robust body has a long tail, and each of its toes has sharp claws. Hyaenodon is an outstanding hunter. Although its brain is small, it has a highly developed sense of smell, a powerful jaw, and its speed allows it to hunt many preys. Its sharp and pointed teeth allow it to crush them when it catches them. Hyaenodon is also a scavenger. It covers the corpses it finds with excrement in order to mask its smell and avoid other scavenging predators to spot it. Standing at 1.50 meters or 5 feet and 3 meters or 10 feet long, Hyaenodon is not afraid to take on large predators like Gastornis, as it can run at speeds of 55 kilometers per hour or 35 miles per hour. 55 million years ago, a group of mammals took a different evolutionary path. Equipped with 2 close-set eyes and opposable thumbed hands, they are the first primates. The precursors are the Palaeontological. These small mammals are insectivorous and arboreal. The first specimen is none other than Purgatorius, this small being that hid as best it could during the fall of the meteorite. The Palaeontological diversify until they form 100 species settled in tropical regions. Their size varies from that of a hamster to that of a squirrel. The primitive architecture of their skull, their small brain, and the presence of claws on their legs do not yet classify them as true primates. However, such as marmosets, baboons, gorillas, and humans. The very first known prosimian is named Alteothalassius. From 55 million years ago, its descendants spread throughout the northern hemisphere. At that time, it is one of the most diverse groups of mammals. The legs of the prosimians evolve and are now hands and feet, equipped with claws that form nails. They are shorter and more flattened than those of the Palaeontological. Their thumb is opposite to the other fingers. They can now hold on to branches and grasp food. The eyes are located on the front of the face and are close together. Even if this position makes them lose the lateral view, which was a real asset to detect predators, it allows a binocular vision in 3 dimensions. Thus, the primates can jump from tree to tree by better evaluating distances and limiting the risks of falling. The whole of the upper cranium is remodeled, contributing to the increase in brain size. In Asia, 45 million years ago, the first real apes appeared. These omnivorous or vegetarian animals have the characteristic of having a large brain and an elaborate social behavior. In the heart of regions covered by vast swampy forests, primitive monkeys rub shoulders with small prosimians. Catapithecus, which lived 36 million years ago, is the oldest of the early apes. The best known and largest is Egyptopithecus. This mammal, weighing 6 to 7 kilograms, or about 13 pounds, inhabits the rainforests that cover North America. It is somewhat similar to the current howler monkey of South America. Egyptopithecus climbs trees, crawls on branches, and feeds on fruit. It has a diurnal lifestyle. It has all the characteristics that differentiate simians from prosimians. Its cranial cavity houses a larger brain. The orbit of its eye is totally closed, which isolates the eyeball from the temporal part of the brain. Its eyes are closer together, which has reduced the navel cavity, and consequently the olfactory capacities. Its powerful mandible is provided with molars, whose crown is relatively flat. The primates will show great diversity, but their anatomy keeps a great unity. Their 5-fingered limbs have nails. The hand has an opposable thumb. It has been perfected and is used as a gripping instrument and as an organ of touch. Sight evolved and improved at the expense of the sense of smell. The orbits are directed towards the front, allowing a good binocular vision. Their complex social organization is also reflected in prolonged maternal care, delayed sexual maturity, and increased longevity. Primates generally live in groups ranging from a few individuals to several hundred members. Females usually give birth to a single calf, sometimes two. For physiological and behavioral reasons, primates range in size from 50 grams to over 100 kilograms, or over 220 pounds. Their diet is diversified. Smaller specimens are more likely to be insectivorous or frugivorous, while larger specimens generally have an omnivorous diet. Primates thrive in tropical and subtropical regions. The majority of monkeys are diurnal, while prosimians live at night. Primates have a wide range of postures and modes of locomotion. In trees, some climb and walk on branches. On the ground, they adopt a quadrupedal gait, but are also capable of running upright and performing lateral jumps. Some species use their tails as a fifth limb to suspend themselves. Some great apes practice a hanging movement by swinging. On the ground, their quadrupedal movement is particular, since they move semi-erect by leaning on the second phalanx of the fingers of the hand. They all practice bipedalism occasionally. Only man makes it his specialty. Some small mammals begin to exploit a new environment, the treetops. Up there is inexhaustible food and safe shelter from predators. However, living in the treetops involves three-dimensional movement, not the two-dimensional movement of terrestrial animals. There is therefore an additional danger, the risk of falling. The little people of the high branches will display particular adaptations, such as a large brain or eyes directed towards the front, allowing to elevate distances precisely. Color vision is also an innovation that allows the animals to easily spot fruits and young leaves, more tender and nutritious. Carpolestes is a small hamster-sized mammal with rodent-like teeth. Its long fingers and opposable thumb allow it to climb easily to the top of trees. Its elbows are not flexible enough for it to leap from branch to branch. Its eyes, located on the sides of the head, do not allow it to evaluate distances with great accuracy. Carpolestes is a close relative of the first apes, but is not a true ancestor. Coryphodon is a large amphibious herbivore. Like modern hippos, it lives in swamps and feeds on aquatic plants. Its size is close to that of a boar, and it can weigh up to 500 kilograms or 1,100 pounds. Its two tusks are not very developed. At this time, it is considered a large animal compared to the average size of humans. The ancestors of whales and dolphins literally galloped on land. Today, it is difficult to imagine how terrestrial quadrupeds could have turned into cetaceans. Despite its name, which means king of reptiles, Basilosaurus is a mammal. The whale-sized animal has a jaw filled with teeth. It does not yet have blowholes, but nostrils located in the middle of the snout, forcing it to take its head out of the water to breathe. It has 2 small hind legs, which are not used to walk or swim. Its long tail and its arms in the shape of fin help it to propel itself to move. Basilosaurus, like other cetacean ancestors, exploits the coastal environment and feeds on fish, crabs, and mollusks. The evolution pushed him to adapt to the marine environment. Its hind legs progressively reduce in size, and its arms and tail become flippers. Its nostrils migrate towards the top of the head to give the vents. The ear evolves to allow the animals to properly hear sounds underwater. Protocetus is a kind of primitive cetacean. It is 2.5 meters or 8 feet long. Its legs, which it uses as flippers, are rather small, but allow it to move on the ground. Its long jaw has very sharp teeth. The structure of its ear allows it to hear well underwater, but certainly not to practice echolocation. Its nostrils are halfway to the snout, which is the first step on the way to the top of the skull in modern cetaceans. Amphibious life is still relevant for these primitive animals. Some females still give birth on land. Bats appear with a Caranectorus. This animal already has the appearance of modern bats. Its wings can reach up to 35 centimeters or 14 inches in span. Its long tail serves as a rudder. Its legs are still too small to allow it to hang upside down. It wears a fur. It likes warm climates and feeds on insects. Even the oldest bats are already able to flap their wings. Dermoptera, or flying lemurs, are an order of mammals. They live in trees and are best equipped for gliding. When they launch themselves from a branch, they extend their 4 limbs in such a way as to stretch a sail of skin that connects their wrists, ankles, and tail. This allows them to glide more than 100 meters or 330 feet. Palms, flowering trees, and conifers thrive. A group of plants will make its appearance in the plant world. They are the herbaceous flowering plants. Their success is linked to the evolution of pollinating insects. Animals that eat seeds and fruits, such as bats and birds, have also contributed to the spread of plants. Herbaceous plants have a secret. They have the ability to survive and thrive, even when cut regularly by animals. Cutting off the tops of their leaves does not damage their growth. They even survive severe harvesting. Expanding grasslands support the survival of herbivorous mammals. Grasses include most of the species commonly called grasses and cereals. They are generally herbaceous plants, whether annual or perennial. They will adapt to a wide variety of environmental conditions, ranging from lush rainforests to arid deserts, from cold mountain climates to tropical climates. They are a valuable source of food and energy for wildlife. Grasses are angiosperms. The flower is a complex structure in which the male and female reproductive organs are grouped and enveloped. The female part will give the fruit at maturity, but only after fertilization. It is the fruit that characterizes the angiosperms. It participates in the dissemination of seeds through various animals, wind, and water. The plants were able to disperse on the 2 continents before the total separation of Gondwana. Birds are small, feathered, flying theropod dinosaurs. Their ancestors were land predators, true hunters of the Jurassic lands. They did not fly. Flight is an adaptation, now indelibly associated with birds. The survival of some species can sometimes be surprising. Before the impact of the meteorite, birds already had a long history behind them. The oldest known, Archaeopteryx, appeared at the end of the Jurassic period, about 150 million years ago. This animal has the body and teeth of a reptile, combined with the feathers of a bird. It represents the missing link between reptiles and birds. Archaeopteryx probably descended from a small terrestrial Coelurosaur. These hollow-tailed reptiles include small, light and fast carnivores like Compsognathus, but also the huge and famous Tyrannosaurus. Some Coelurosaurs were covered with feathers and could fly. Their skeleton is very similar to that of birds. Feathers and flight did not appear all at once, but were acquired through evolution. Feathers are, according to some theories, an evolution of reptilian scales. Before it became the modern feather, as we know it today, the form and function of ancestral feathers were different. The archaic function of the feather is its insulation. By being covered in feathers, the animal is able to retain body heat and protect itself from the cold. Some of the earliest feathers have a configuration that is no longer seen today. They have a more unstructured, down-like branching and configuration. It is as if a number of filaments had been gathered and fused at their base. The kiwi, a species of bird that is currently unable to fly, has feathers that look like hair, as if they had been simplified because they are not needed for flight. Feathers also play a role in display or camouflage. They can also be used for recognition between groups of individuals or as mate attraction partners. Feathers are also protective, keeping eggs out of the sun or warming them by trapping air. They can be used during sexual parade. Flight is defined as the active production of energy that propels the animal through the air using its own power. This requires certain physiological characteristics such as hollow bones, a strong sternum, and a perched foot. In order to fly, the animal must have an airworthy wing. It must be able to generate a vortex wake that propels it forward. Its neuromuscular coordination must allow it to navigate efficiently, and its metabolic level must support flight for long periods. Archaeopteryx already possesses an airworthy wing, which makes it capable of generating the flight stroke. It has an ear canal, reflecting the ability to negotiate three-dimensional space, which is particularly useful for an animal traveling through the air. It would seem that its capacity for flight is weak. Several scenarios are possible as to the acquisition and origin of flight. Everything could have started from trees. Some species would have been able to climb high enough to jump, then glide and fly. Another scenario is that some animals would have started by running along the ground while flapping their proto-wings, which would have given them thrust and lift until they could lift off the ground. While birds are considered particularly sensitive to environmental fluctuations, they remain the sole heirs of the dinosaurs. 10,000 living species of birds have been recorded today, whereas it seems that there were only a few during the dinosaur era, including the Archaeopteryx and Pterosaur lines. Most of the modern bird orders were established and put in place 55 million years ago. The speciation of the different groups is stimulated by the changing patterns of glaciation at the time, which results in a cooling and drying of the climate. Around 60 million years ago, a strong volcanic episode in the North Atlantic releases carbon dioxide. A first warming of the lower atmosphere and oceanic waters is felt. The methane stored in the sediments on the continental margins is destabilized. Released en masse, it leads to a thermal peak and a sudden climatic warming. It is at this time that the context becomes favorable to the rapid diversification of mammals. Their development will lead them to master swimming and flying. The Cordilleras in the west of the Americas undergo intense deformations. Europe is dragged into a subduction and gets closer to Africa. Their contact leads to the formation of mountains, including the Alps, completed by folding on the margins of the Persian Gulf and the Himalayan uplift, where India sinks under Asia. Around 34 million years ago, an important climatic change occurs due to continental drift. The global temperature decreased, and the different seasons became more pronounced. The arm of the sea which separates Europe from Asia undergoes a regression, which opens new routes to the fauna and the flora on both sides. Sometime later, North America and Scandinavian Europe separate. After the warming period, the Earth is again affected by major ice ages. Following the formation of the American Cordilleras and the Alpine chains, the Caribbean and Tethys closed. The link between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean is cut in the warm zone. The sea currents change to a predominantly north to south direction, especially in the Atlantic, which leads to the cooling of the globe. Around 23 million years ago, Antarctica began a generalized freeze-up of its surface. Surrounded by an ocean current that prevents warm water from reaching it, it becomes isolated from South America and becomes a large reservoir of cold. The cause of climate change could also be explained by a tilt of the axis of the planet. The Earth would thus receive little light during a part of the year, which would mark the seasons even more and would imply a lower average temperature. The change in climate, which is becoming colder and drier, is causing many of the world's landscapes to change. Savannas and steppes are replacing forests. The modification of food resources disturbs herbivorous species, but also their predators. Species must evolve and adapt to the new conditions. The small forest herbivores that used to feed on leaves are now replaced by large grass-eating species. The expansion of grasslands favors the appearance of animals capable of running faster and longer. Grass, as a food resource, is less nutritious and wears down teeth more quickly. The animals must therefore consume large quantities of grass, and continuously growing teeth appear, as in rodents and horses. This adaptation compensates for the rapid wear of the teeth of herbivores. Many species will disappear among the archaic mammals. They leave the place to other groups like rodents, ruminants, or modern carnivores. The evolution of mammals leads to more and more diverse forms and to the birth of real giants that could almost be compared to the largest dinosaurs. This evolutionary trend towards larger and larger animals is explained by the fact that they were originally small. Being large has many advantages. Some predators are less likely to attack large animals, and it is also easier to find food. Their temperature is kept constant while they expend less energy. However, the overall amount of vegetation needed by large herbivores is substantial. They cannot be very numerous, and their species will be more vulnerable in case of a crisis. The Velociraptor is a hornless rhinoceros. At 5 meters or 16 feet, it is the largest known representative of this group, and one of the largest land mammals. It manages to graze on the tallest leaves of trees. In comparison, it is as big as a giraffe, but weighs a lot more, as it can reach up to 15 tons. Despite its large size, it remains prey to crocodiles and other predators. At its side, we find cousins of the current boars and warthogs, the entelodonts. They can be recognized by their enormous heads, bristling with bony growths. These hoofed animals feed on small animals, roots, and plants that they can dig up with their tusks. Among them, Dinosaurus, a large animal of 2 meters or 7 feet high, and weighing about 1.5 tons, is a scavenger that comes to crush the bones of dead animals with its powerful jaws. The Megatherium belongs to the Edentulus family, like the modern sloths. Unlike the latter, it lives on the ground because its gigantic size does not allow it to climb trees. It can reach up to 6 meters or 20 feet long and weigh up to 4 tons, as much as an Asian elephant. It moves on all fours and stands up if it needs to feed. Thanks to its powerful claws, it attracts the branches of the trees to crunch the leaves. Little by little, grasslands and savannas take the place of forests. Animals adapt to this change, and new species of herbivores replace the old ones. Grass grows from its base all the faster if it is cut often. When the climate permits this regrowth, there is no shortage of food for the grass eaters. Grass quickly wears down the teeth. This new diet requires special adaptations to the teeth. Distant cousins of camels and llamas appeared. They are the protoceratids. Most of the species have strange horns on their heads, like the Synthetosaurus, which has a forked horn on its snout and a pair of extra horns on its head. This is a formidable weapon for fights between males, since these ornaments are absent in females. 35 million years ago, ruminants, a new group of hoofed herbivores, appeared. These animals have specialized stomachs that allow them to digest hard grass on the prairies with greater ease. Their continuously growing teeth compensate for the wear and tear caused by chewing. They first settled in Asia, but very quickly the species colonized America and Africa, and the ancestors of giraffes, deer, cows, and antelopes showed up. The Hoplitomeryx is a curious animal that has 5 horns on its skull, one of which is located in the middle of the forehead. Barely higher than a goat, it has 2 long canines in the shape of a defense. With its elk-like appearance, the Civotherium is one of the first giraffes to live in India. It is much smaller and more massive than the giraffe and has large horns. Faced with these herbivores that grow and arm themselves with horns and tusks, the carnivores also evolve. The former are small animals that can easily climb trees to look for their prey. Their diet is rather varied, with meat, fruits, leaves, eggs, and insects. Over time, their offspring will develop particularly large and sharp teeth, functioning like shears. It is at this time that the first true carnivores appear, feeding exclusively on flesh. 2 lines of carnivores were born. On one side, the lineage that will give birth to wolves, bears, and seals, and on the other side, the lineage that will give birth to hyenas and felines. In some species, the fangs become long and strong. These impressive predators are called saber-toothed tigers, although they are not actually related to tigers. predators. Their skulls had to be modified to make room for these huge canines. Their face is rather short, and the musculature of their neck is powerful. The canines are flat and sometimes crenulated. Saber-toothed tigers choke their prey by biting them in the throat. Saber-toothed predators occur in several lineages, so very similar adaptations are found in species that may be distant. Rodents are also characterized by their sharp teeth. They have continuously growing incisors that will sharpen by rubbing against each other. This makes them very sharp and allows them to cut pieces of food or wood. Further down in the jaw, particularly hard molars allow them to crush food. Before rodents, other small primitive mammals, the multituberculates, had this type of dentition. They were the first vegetarian mammals. It is only after their disappearance that the real rodents will take an important place. Today, they represent almost half of all mammal species. The first rodents appeared in Asia, and then spread throughout the world until they even reached Australia. They diversify, occupy all environments, and specialize. Some species become semi-aquatic, like the beavers. Others live in trees. Others still live in deep burrows. Most rodents have modest sizes, but some rare species reach much larger sizes. This is the case of Fabaromus, which weighs nearly 700 kilograms or 1,500 pounds. This caviomorph is part of the guinea pig and capybara family. A last large family is imposed in mastery at the time. They are the proboscideans. The current elephants are the last descendants. The primitive elephants are represented, among others, by Moratherium. As big as a pig, its massive body is supported by short legs. It spends a lot of time in the water. It has no proboscis, but a thick and mobile upper lip. A little later, some species start to have a short trunk. The trunk in elephants comes from the fusion of the nose and the upper lip. For reasons of balance and muscle power, the large head of elephants must be carried by a short neck. The movements are then limited to reach the vegetation, hence the appearance of the trunk, which proves to be very useful. Mass extinctions have irreversible consequences for biodiversity by causing the disappearance of many species and reducing the diversity of life forms on Earth. Ecosystems, species relationships, and life cycles are disrupted. Nevertheless, they allow the appearance of new life forms that occupy the ecological niches left vacant by the extinct species. Today's world has a beautiful and rich history. The past is necessarily different from the present. This history was not originally written. The Earth is continually undergoing unforeseen events, extraterrestrial or not, taking evolution in new directions. A part of the actors is then ousted, while the survivors are favored. Thanks to the fossil remains buried in the deep layers of the Earth, we now know that the parrot was not born a parrot and that the dolphin was not born a dolphin. The stone skeletons reveal to us every day this history to which we belong. For although modern man does not appear in this chapter, his ancestors are largely represented. Without the disappearance of the dinosaurs, we would certainly not be here to talk about it.